The day Vivian Cole almost died in her own penthouse, the only person who could have saved her wasn't supposed to exist at all. He was invisible, a shadow with a mop bucket, a man the world had trained her not to see. But that night, when her lungs seized and the room spun into darkness, Daniel Brooks made a choice that would shatter both their carefully constructed lives. This is the story of how silence nearly killed one woman and how one janitor refused to look away. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The city of Los Angeles stretched below Vivian Cole's penthouse like a glittering empire she'd conquered through sheer force of will. 23 floors up, surrounded by walls of pristine glass and minimalist luxury, she stood at her floor-to-ceiling window each morning and reminded herself what she'd built. A tech company worth $200 million. A reputation that made venture capitalists return her calls within minutes. A face that graced magazine covers with headlines like "The Woman Who Doesn't Sleep" and "Silicon Valley's Ice Queen Melts Nothing Except Competition." The irony, of course, was that she couldn't sleep. Not really. Not the deep, restful kind that left you feeling human. Instead, Vivian existed in a perpetual state of exhausted alertness, her body vibrating with a tension she'd long ago accepted as the price of excellence. 4 hours a night if she was lucky. Usually less. She'd lie in her king-sized bed, Egyptian cotton sheets, temperature-controlled mattress, blackout curtains, and stare at the ceiling while her heart hammered against her ribs, like something trying to escape. Her doctor said it was stress. Her therapist suggested meditation. Her assistant recommended a wellness retreat in Sedona. Vivian had nodded at all of them, added their suggestions to a mental file labeled "Things Other People Need," and carried on exactly as before. Because stopping wasn't an option. Slowing down meant falling behind. And falling behind meant becoming irrelevant, invisible, forgotten. Everything Vivian had sworn she'd never be. On this particular Tuesday morning in October, she stood in her bathroom examining her reflection with the clinical assessment of someone inspecting a piece of machinery for defects. 34 years old, skin still good, though the concealer under her eyes had become less optional and more architectural necessity. Hair pulled back in the severe ponytail that had become her signature. Efficient, no nonsense, a style that said she had more important things to think about than vanity. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her toothbrush. That was new. Or rather, it wasn't new anymore. It had been happening for months. This fine tremor that made her feel like her body was being run by faulty electrical wiring. She'd mentioned it to Dr. Chen during her last executive physical. "Probably caffeine," he'd said, barely glancing up from his tablet. "Try cutting back to 3 cups a day." She'd laughed. 3 cups. She'd had 3 cups before 7 a.m., but the tremor wasn't the worst of it. There was the breathlessness that came in waves, sudden and inexplicable, like her lungs had forgotten their job mid-breath. The dizzy spells that made her grip the edge of conference tables and pretend she was just leaning in to make a point. The way her heart would suddenly race for no reason at all, pounding so hard she could see her blouse moving with each beat. And through it all, the exhaustion. The bone-deep, soul-crushing tiredness that no amount of cold brew or motivational podcast could touch. She popped 2 mints into her mouth, the strong kind, the ones that made her eyes water, and turned away from the mirror. There was a board meeting at 9, a product launch at 11. Investor calls stacked back-to-back all afternoon. No time for the luxury of feeling human. The penthouse around her reflected her philosophy with ruthless precision. Clean lines, no clutter. Everything in its place and a place for everything. The living room contained exactly 1 sofa, gray, expensive, uncomfortable enough to discourage lingering. A glass coffee table held nothing but a single art book she'd never read. The kitchen was a masterpiece of unused stainless steel and marble, a stage set for a life she didn't have time to live. No photographs on the walls, no personal touches, no evidence that an actual person with an actual history lived here. That was intentional. Vivian had learned early that success required sacrifice, and the first thing she'd sacrificed was the messy reality of being human. Emotions were liabilities. Connections were vulnerabilities. The past was dead weight. So she'd stripped her life down to the essentials: work, achievement, reputation. Everything else was just noise. She grabbed her laptop bag and headed for the door, pausing only to adjust the thermostat. 62 degrees. She kept it cold now, all the time. It helped with it just helped. The elevator ride down was a familiar meditation in isolation. 23 floors of silence, the city dropping away beneath her feet. By the time she reached the parking garage, she'd already fielded 6 emails on her phone and restructured her afternoon to accommodate an emergency meeting about their latest product's user retention numbers. Her driver was waiting, as always. Marcus had worked for her for 3 years, and she could count on one hand the number of times they'd had an actual conversation. That was how she preferred it: professional distance, clear boundaries, no unnecessary intimacy. "Good morning, Ms. Cole," he said, opening the door. She nodded, already sliding into the back seat with her eyes on her screen. Didn't notice the concerned look he exchanged with the parking attendant. Didn't see the way his gaze lingered on her in the rearview mirror, noting the pallor of her skin, the purple shadows under her eyes, the way her hands shook as she typed. People who worked for Vivian Cole learned quickly that she didn't want to be seen. Not really. She wanted to be efficient, respected, feared, maybe, but not seen. The office was in full swing by the time she arrived, a hive of activity that parted around her like water around a stone. "Morning, Ms. Cole." "Ms. Cole, the Beijing team needs 5 minutes." "Ms. Cole, we have those revised projections you requested." She moved through it all with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd long ago stopped distinguishing between her identity and her work. She was TechCore Industries. The company was her. There was no separation, no boundary where one ended and the other began. The board meeting was brutal. 90 minutes of thinly veiled challenges to her authority, questions about market share, pointed comments about her aggressive expansion strategy. She fielded every attack with icy precision, her voice never wavering even as her heart hammered, and her vision tunneled slightly at the edges. "The numbers speak for themselves," she said, pulling up a presentation that had taken her team 3 weeks to perfect. "We've doubled our user base in 6 months. Revenue is up 47%. Our competitors are hemorrhaging market share while we're capturing emerging sectors they didn't even know existed." "Yes, but at what cost?" This from Gerald Finch, the board member who'd never quite forgiven her for being appointed CEO over his nephew. "We're hearing concerns about burnout. Turnover is within industry standards," Vivian cut him off smoothly. "And our retention of top performers is actually 12% above the tech sector average. The people who leave are the ones who can't keep pace. That's not a bug, Gerald. It's a feature." A few chuckles around the table. She had them. She always had them eventually. But as she stood there, backlit by the presentation screen, she felt the now familiar sensation of her body staging a small rebellion. The room tilted slightly. Her breath came shallow and quick. Sweat prickled at her hairline despite the aggressive air conditioning. She gripped the edge of the table, disguising it as emphasis. "The question isn't whether we're pushing hard enough. It's whether we're pushing hard enough to stay ahead. Because I promise you, our competitors aren't wondering if their teams are comfortable. They're wondering how to bury us." The meeting ended with grudging nods and a unanimous vote to continue her strategic direction. Victory, again. It should have felt good. Instead, she retreated to her office, closed the door, and spent 5 minutes with her head between her knees, trying to remember how to breathe normally. This was happening more often now, these moments when her body simply refused to cooperate, when the machine she'd built herself into threatened to break down entirely. She reached into her desk drawer, not the top one where she kept pens and business cards, but the bottom one, hidden behind old files and a stack of industry reports no one would ever look at. Inside was a crumpled softpack and a lighter. Her hands were steadier as she touched them. Just touching them helped somehow, the weight of them, the promise of relief they represented. Not here, of course. Never here. She had rules. But tonight, after everyone left, when the building was empty and dark and the cleaning crew had come and gone, when she could finally stop performing the role of Vivian Cole, untouchable tech mogul, and become just Vivian. Tired, scared, barely holding on. Tonight, on the balcony no one knew existed. Tonight, she'd breathe. The afternoon blurred past in a haze of video calls and product reviews and carefully modulated responses to crises that weren't really crises, just the normal chaos of running a company where everyone wanted a piece of her attention. By 6 p.m., her assistant Rachel poked her head in with the careful expression of someone approaching a wild animal. "I'm heading out, Ms. Cole. Do you need anything before I go?" Vivian didn't look up from her laptop. "No, have a good evening." Rachel hesitated. "You're working late again?" "Just need to finish a few things." "You said that yesterday, and the day before, and—" "Rachel," Vivian's voice was arctic. "I appreciate your concern, but my schedule is my concern." The younger woman's face flushed. "Right. Of course. You look tired." "I look productive. There's a difference." After Rachel left, Vivian allowed herself a moment of stillness. The office around her had fallen quiet, that particular silence of a workspace emptied of humans. Outside her window, Los Angeles was transforming into its nighttime self, less a city, more a constellation of light and ambition and broken dreams. She worked until 8, until 9, until the building security guard made his rounds and tapped on her door to make sure she knew she was alone. "Heading home soon, Ms. Cole?" "Soon," she lied. She waited until his footsteps faded, until the building settled into its nighttime stillness. Then she stood, stretched muscles that had locked into position hours ago, and made her way to the executive balcony. It was a secret space, accessible only from her office, original to the building's design when it had housed a different kind of corporate power. The developer who'd renovated the space had wanted to remove it. Wasted square footage, they'd said, but Vivian had insisted on keeping it. Not because she ever intended to use it for its intended purpose, for fresh air and contemplative moments and whatever other wellness nonsense people pretended balconies were for. She'd kept it because she needed somewhere to hide what she was becoming. The October air was cool against her skin as she stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The balcony was narrow, barely 6 feet deep, with a waist-high glass barrier that showed the city stretching endlessly below. Up here, the noise of traffic was distant, muffled. Up here, she could almost pretend she was alone in the world. She sat on the single chair she kept out here, weather-worn, anonymous, and pulled out the soft pack. Her hands didn't shake now. This was the only time they didn't shake. The first drag was always the best. The way the smoke filled her lungs, harsh and familiar. The way it made her feel like she could breathe even as it made breathing harder. The brief, beautiful illusion of control. She'd started in college. Everyone did back then. Social smoking at parties, bumming cigarettes during study sessions, the occasional stress relief break during finals. Nothing serious. Nothing that couldn't be quit whenever she wanted, except she'd never quite wanted to. And then it became useful. An appetite suppressant when she was too busy to eat properly. A sleep aid when her mind wouldn't shut off. A social tool for bonding with investors who stepped outside for a smoke. A tiny rebellion against the perfection everyone expected. But then her company took off. Her profile rose. She became someone people recognized, someone whose image mattered. Smoking didn't fit the brand. The health-conscious, yoga at dawn, green juice drinking tech executive had no room for something as D-class as a nicotine addiction. So she quit. Publicly. Made a whole thing of it in an interview, talking about wellness and self-optimization and taking control of your health. And then privately, she'd started again. Not in public. Never where anyone could see. No smoke breaks with colleagues, no cigarettes at conferences, no evidence that could be photographed or shared or used against her. Just here. Alone. Where no one would ever know that the perfect Vivian Cole was anything less than perfect. She was halfway through her second cigarette when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. The soft scrape of a door opening, the quiet thud of it closing. Vivian's heart lurched. She dropped the cigarette, grinding it out quickly against the chair leg, waving her hand frantically to disperse the smoke. But it was too late. Even as she turned, she saw him. A man in his early 30s, wearing the dark blue uniform of the building's cleaning service. Average height, lean build, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were already looking away, down, anywhere but at her. He froze in the doorway, mop bucket in one hand, clearly as startled to find her there as she was to be found. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, already backing up. I didn't know anyone was still here. I'll come back. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I mean, it's fine. I was just leaving. But she wasn't moving, and he wasn't moving, and the smoke still hung in the air between them, visible in the city lights reflected off the glass. They both knew what he'd seen. Vivian felt her face burn with something she hadn't experienced in years. Shame. Raw, adolescent shame at being caught doing something she shouldn't. She was a CEO, a millionaire, a woman who commanded rooms full of powerful men without blinking. And yet here she was, feeling like a teenager caught sneaking cigarettes behind the gym. I won't say anything, the man said quietly. It's not my business. It's not what it looks like, she heard herself say, immediately hating how defensive she sounded. He finally met her eyes, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Not judgment, not pity. Something else. Something that made her feel even more exposed than being caught with a cigarette. Okay, he said simply. And then he did something unexpected. He stepped fully into the office, set down his bucket, and began emptying her trash can with the same quiet efficiency as if she weren't there at all, as if this were completely normal, as if he hadn't just caught her in the act of slowly destroying herself. Vivian watched him work, her mind spinning. She should leave, should maintain her dignity and sweep out of here like the interruption was beneath her notice, should make it clear through sheer force of will that this interaction never happened. Instead, she stayed. Maybe because she was tired of leaving, tired of running from every moment that threatened to make her human. Or maybe because there was something oddly comforting about his complete lack of reaction. He wasn't appalled or concerned or judgmental. He was just there, doing his job, allowing her to exist without commentary. "What's your name?" she asked, surprising herself. He glanced up, equally surprised. Daniel Brooks." "How long have you worked here, Daniel?" 3 months. I'm usually on the lower floors, but someone called in sick tonight." He tied off the trash bag with practiced efficiency. "I clean your penthouse too, Tuesday and Friday nights." Of course he did. She'd never noticed, had never once registered the person who kept her living space immaculate, who ensured her sterile sanctuary remained pristine. "I'm usually not there," she said, though she had no idea why she was explaining herself to the cleaning man. "I know." There was no judgment in his tone, just fact. "You work a lot." "How would you know that?" A slight smile barely there. "Your coffee cups. Usually 4 or 5 lined up on your desk by the time I get there. Sometimes more." The observation unsettled her. The stranger had been in her space, had seen evidence of her habits, had drawn conclusions about her life, and she'd never even known he existed. "Well," she said, feeling the need to reassert some kind of boundary, "I should let you work." "Sure." He moved toward the bathroom, then paused. "Ms. Cole?" She'd been halfway to the door. "Yes?" "You should drink more water. Dehydration makes everything harder." Before she could formulate a response, indignant or otherwise, he disappeared into the bathroom, the sound of running water filling the space. Vivian stood there for a moment, caught between irritation and something else. Something uncomfortable. Then she grabbed her laptop bag and left, taking the private elevator down to the parking garage where Marcus was still waiting, patient and silent, as always. She didn't think about Daniel Brooks on the ride home, didn't wonder how he'd noticed her coffee cups, or why he'd bothered to mention the water, or what else he might have observed in her space. She had bigger things to think about. A company to run, competitors to crush, an empire to maintain. But when she got home to her penthouse, the place where she should have felt most herself, most at ease, she couldn't shake the feeling of being seen, actually seen. And it terrified her. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it that morning, pristine, silent, empty. Vivian dropped her bag by the door and moved through the space like a ghost haunting her own life. She should eat something, should review the briefing materials for tomorrow's meetings, should respond to the 17 emails that had come in during the drive home. Instead, she found herself on her own balcony, the one attached to her bedroom, the one that faced west toward the ocean she could never quite see through the smog and city lights. The night air was cooler up here, 23 floors above the street, quiet in a way that felt almost aggressive, like the silence was daring her to fill it. She thought about Daniel Brooks, about the way he'd looked at her, or rather, the way he hadn't looked at her. No awe at her success, no judgment of her weakness. Just a man doing his job, offering unsolicited advice about hydration like she was a normal person who might appreciate it. When was the last time someone had spoken to her that way? Without calculation or agenda, without wanting something, or fearing something, or playing some angle. She couldn't remember. Vivian reached for the pack in her jacket pocket, then stopped, looked at her hand. The tremor was back. Had been back all evening, actually, but she'd been ignoring it. Along with the tightness in her chest, the slight wheeze when she breathed too deep, the way her heart kept racing like it was trying to outrun something. "You look tired," Rachel had said. "You look tired. You look tired. You look tired." Everyone kept saying it in various ways, concern masquerading as professionalism. But what they really meant was, "You look sick. You look like you're falling apart. You look like you can't handle this." And they were right. The thought came with startling clarity, cutting through all the denial and justification and carefully constructed narratives she'd been building for months. She was sick. She was falling apart. She couldn't handle this. Not like this. Not at this pace. Not while slowly poisoning herself in secret. Vivian looked at the cigarette pack in her hand, really looked at it, tried to remember when it had become this, not a choice, but a necessity. Not a pleasure, but a crutch. Not something she did, but something she needed. She should throw it away. Should make this the moment, the turning point, the dramatic decision that changed everything. Instead, she lit one and inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar burn, the toxic comfort. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, she'd make changes. Tomorrow, she'd be better. Tomorrow. Below her, the city glittered with broken promises and abandoned tomorrows. Millions of people telling themselves the same lies. Millions of tomorrows that never came. Vivian smoked until her lungs hurt and her head spun, and the shaking in her hands spread to the rest of her body. Then she went inside, took 2 sleeping pills with a handful of water, and lay in her expensive bed staring at her expensive ceiling, waiting for unconsciousness to claim her. It didn't come. Instead, she spent the night in that terrible half-state between waking and sleeping, her mind churning with numbers and strategies and increasingly creative ways to avoid facing what she already knew. This couldn't last. Something had to give. The question was whether it would be her empire or her body, and which she was more afraid to lose. And Thursday night came faster than Vivian was ready for. The week had been a blur of crisis management and high-stakes negotiations, each day bleeding into the next until time became meaningless. She'd stopped checking how many hours she'd worked, stopped counting coffee cups, stopped pretending the tightness in her chest was just stress. The building was empty by 9 p.m., everyone gone to their lives, their families, their normal existences where work had boundaries and bodies had limits. Vivian was still at her desk. She'd meant to leave, had even packed her bag, shut down her computer, put on her coat. But then she'd seen an email from their lead developer about a potential security flaw, and one quick response had turned into an hour-long deep dive, which had turned into a conference call with their overseas team, which had somehow brought her back to this moment. Alone. Again. Always. The knock on her door was so unexpected she actually jumped. "Come in," she called, expecting building security. It was Daniel Brooks. He stood in the doorway much like he had on the balcony, that same quality of being present without imposing. Tonight he wore the same dark blue uniform, carried the same bucket, but there was something different about his expression. Less carefully neutral. More concerned? "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I'm doing the executive floor tonight. Wanted to make sure it was okay to clean while you're still here." "It's fine." She turned back to her screen, dismissing him. He didn't move. After a moment, Vivian looked up again. Was there something else? Daniel hesitated, and she could see him weighing something, deciding whether to speak or retreat into professional silence. "You've been here every night this week," he said finally. "So have you." "It's my job." "It's mine too." "No." He shook his head. "Your job is to run a company, not to live in the office." The audacity of it stunned her. This janitor, this nobody, was lecturing her about work-life balance? I don't recall asking for your opinion about how I manage my time. You're right. You didn't. He moved into the room, began emptying her trash with that same quiet efficiency. But someone should probably say something. Someone, her voice dripped ice. Who appointed you the guardian of my well-being, exactly? He dumped the contents of her trash can into his bag. 5 coffee cups, 3 energy drink cans, 2 protein bar wrappers. Evidence of a day lived on chemical fuel and denial. No one appointed me anything, he said. But I've been watching you kill yourself for 3 months now, and I figured maybe someone should mention it. Even if that someone is just the guy who cleans your floors. Vivian stood, rage flooding through her. You've been watching me? That's incredibly... I've been doing my job, he interrupted, and there was steel in his voice now. Which involves coming into your space and seeing what you leave behind. The coffee cups that multiply every day. The lights that are always on, even at 2 in the morning. The way you... He stopped abruptly. The way I what? He met her eyes, and something in his expression made her breath catch. The way you smell like smoke even though your building is non-smoking. The way you keep mints everywhere. The way you've got an air purifier running 24/7 in a penthouse with million-dollar ventilation. Heat flooded her face. You're crossing a line. I know. He tied off the trash bag. But someone needs to. Because you're not okay, Ms. Cole. And everyone around you is either too scared or too busy making money off you to say it. Get out. I have 4 more offices to clean. Then clean them. But stay away from mine. From now on, I'll make other arrangements. Daniel nodded slowly, something like disappointment crossing his features. Sure. I understand. Easier to hide when there's no one around to see. He was at the door when she spoke again, her voice brittle. You don't know anything about me. He paused, looked back. I know you work 80-hour weeks and run on caffeine and whatever else you're using to keep going. I know your hands shake when you think no one's looking. I know you've lost weight every week for the past 3 months. I've watched you get smaller, like you're disappearing. And I know you're terrified that if anyone sees the real you, the whole perfect image will shatter. Silence stretched between them, taut as wire. I know all of that, Daniel continued quietly, because I watched my wife die the same way. Different poison, same lies. I'm fine. I can handle it. Just a little stressed. Until one day she wasn't fine and couldn't handle it, and stress wasn't the problem anymore. Vivian's anger drained away, replaced by something cold and terrible. I'm not your wife. No, you're not. She didn't have a choice when the cancer came, but you do. He hefted his bucket. Anyway, I'll stay away from your office. Good luck, Ms. Cole. This time when he left, she didn't call him back. She stood there for a long time, alone in her pristine office, his words echoing in the silence. Different poison, same lies. Finally, mechanically, she gathered her things and made her way to the elevator. The ride down felt longer than usual, each floor a small eternity. By the time she reached the parking garage, her whole body was trembling. Marcus took one look at her and got out of the car. Miss Cole? Are you all right? I'm fine. The automatic response. The lie she'd perfected, but her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't get her seatbelt fastened. Marcus reached over gently and clicked it into place, not commenting on the tears she didn't realize were streaming down her face. The drive home was silent except for her ragged breathing. When they pulled up to her building, Marcus turned around in his seat, his kind eyes full of concern. Whatever you're carrying, Ms. Cole, it's too heavy. You know that, right? She couldn't answer, could only nod and flee into her building, into her elevator, into her perfect empty penthouse. The balcony called to her, the secret one, the one where she didn't have to be perfect, Vivian Cole. She stood there with a cigarette between her fingers, unlit, watching the city breathe below her. Different poison, same lies. She thought about Daniel Brooks's wife. Wondered what kind of person she'd been. Wondered if she'd also stood on balconies, harboring secrets, convincing herself that tomorrow would be the day everything changed. Wondered if she'd run out of tomorrows before she ran out of lies. Vivian looked at the cigarette, then at the pack, then at the lighter she always kept in her pocket. The city glittered, indifferent to her crisis. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of people fighting their own battles with their own demons. She was just one more. Nothing special, nothing unique, just another person slowly dying while pretending to live. The thought should have been depressing. Instead, it was oddly freeing. She wasn't the exception, wasn't the success story who'd transcended human weakness through sheer force of will. She was just human, fallible, scared, sick. Vivian dropped the cigarette over the balcony edge, watched it tumble down 23 floors into the night. Then she took out the pack and threw that too. And the lighter. And the backup pack she kept hidden in her bedroom nightstand. And the emergency stash from her car. All of it, gone. She stood there breathing hard, her heart racing, her whole body screaming for the relief she'd just thrown away. Tomorrow, she whispered to the empty night. Tomorrow I'll be better. But this time, she meant it. This time she had to. Because Daniel Brooks was right. She was disappearing. And if she didn't stop now, there might not be enough of her left to save. The realization terrified her. But not as much as the alternative. The withdrawal hit her at 3 a.m. like a freight train she'd forgotten was coming. Vivian jolted awake, drenched in sweat, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. The room spun. Her hands clutched at sheets that felt like sandpaper against her hypersensitive skin. Every nerve in her body was screaming, demanding the relief she'd thrown over the balcony 6 hours earlier. She stumbled to the bathroom and barely made it to the toilet before her stomach revolted, heaving up nothing but bile and regret. When the spasms finally stopped, she collapsed against the cool tile floor, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. This was a mistake. A terrible, arrogant mistake. She couldn't do this. Couldn't just quit cold turkey like some kind of superhero. She needed help, medical intervention, a gradual reduction plan. She needed what she'd thrown away. Her phone was in her hand before she'd consciously decided to reach for it. 3:17 a.m. Too late to call anyone. Too early to pretend this was a normal problem requiring normal solutions. But there were 24-hour convenience stores, gas stations, places where a desperate woman with a credit card could undo her moment of weakness and return to the comfortable lies she knew how to live with. Vivian pulled herself up using the sink, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. She didn't need to see what she already knew, that she looked like death, felt worse, and was about to prove Daniel Brooks right about everything. Different poison, same lies. She made it as far as the elevator before her legs gave out, just sat down right there in her private hallway, back against the wall, head in her hands. The shaking wouldn't stop. The nausea kept rising in waves, and underneath it all, a craving so intense it felt like her cells were trying to crawl out of her skin in search of what they needed. "You're Vivian Cole," she whispered to herself. "You've built a $200 million company. You've faced down boardrooms full of men who wanted you to fail. You've conquered markets that experts said were impossible. You can handle one night without a cigarette." But the shaking didn't stop, and the sun was still hours away, and she was so tired of being strong. Her phone buzzed, an email from Rachel, time-stamped 3:22 a.m. "Ms. Cole, I know you're probably awake. Just wanted to send tomorrow's schedule. Board wants to move the quarterly review up by 2 days. I tried to push back, but Finch insisted. Also, the Wall Street Journal called asking for comment on the Forbes piece. Should I send them to PR? Tomorrow. Work. Performance. The carefully constructed machinery of her life that required her to be functional, flawless, inhuman. How was she supposed to lead a board meeting when she could barely stand? Vivian forced herself to her feet and made her way back to the penthouse. Not to the balcony this time. To the kitchen. She filled a glass with water and drank it down, remembering Daniel's unsolicited advice. Then another. And another. Until her stomach sloshed and the nausea intensified, but at least she was doing something that wasn't surrendering. The rest of the night passed in excruciating increments. She tried lying down, but her skin crawled. Tried watching television, but couldn't focus on anything except the screaming need in her blood. Tried working, but her hands shook too badly to type. By the time weak morning light began filtering through her windows, she'd paced approximately 4,000 circles around her living room, cried twice, and seriously contemplated whether dying might be easier than this. Her phone alarm went off at 6 a.m. Time to get up, get ready, become Vivian Cole again. Except she wasn't sure there was enough of Vivian Cole left to become. She stood in the shower for 40 minutes, letting scalding water pound against her back, trying to wash away the poison her body was purging. When she finally emerged, her skin was bright red, and the shaking had downgraded from earthquake to mild tremor. Progress. Maybe. Getting dressed took twice as long as usual. Her fingers fumbled with buttons. The pencil skirt she'd worn last week hung loose on her hips. Daniel had been right about the weight loss, too. She compensated with a blazer and sheer force of will, checking her reflection with the critical eye of someone preparing for battle. She looked terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, like a corpse propped up in designer clothing, but she'd looked worse and still commanded rooms. She could do this. Marcus was waiting in the garage, his expression carefully neutral when he saw her. "Good morning, Ms. Cole." "Morning." Her voice sounded like gravel. "Are you feeling all right? You look—" "I'm fine." The snap in her tone was automatic, defensive. Then, softer. "Just didn't sleep well." The drive to the office was torture. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of nausea through her. Every red light felt like an eternity. By the time they pulled up to her building, she was gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles were white. "Ms. Cole?" Marcus's voice was gentle. "You don't have to do this. Whatever meeting you have, they can reschedule." "They can't!" She forced herself to let go of the handle, to breathe. "But thank you, Marcus." She made it through the lobby, into the elevator, up to her floor. Rachel was already at her desk, looking surprised to see her arrive on time for once. "Oh, Ms. Cole, I didn't think— I have your coffee ready and the briefing materials for—" She stopped, really looking at Vivian. "Are you okay? You look really pale." "I'm fine, just need to—" Vivian gestured vaguely toward her office and escaped before Rachel could ask more questions. The coffee was waiting on her desk. Dark roast, 3 sugars, exactly how she always took it. She stared at it like it was a live grenade. Caffeine, her other crutch. The socially acceptable addiction that kept her functional. If she was really doing this, really changing, shouldn't she give up everything? But that was insane. She couldn't run a company without coffee, couldn't make it through board meetings and investor calls and product launches on nothing but water and willpower. Could she? Vivian picked up the cup, brought it to her lips, and nearly gagged. The smell alone made her stomach revolt. She set it down quickly, breathing hard. Okay. No coffee today? Just today. She'd figure out the rest later. The morning crawled by in a haze of misery barely contained behind professional competence. She fielded calls while her hands trembled, reviewed documents while her vision periodically tunneled, made decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars while fighting the urge to vomit on her keyboard. At 10:47 a.m., she excused herself from a video conference and barely made it to her private bathroom before her body staged another rebellion. She knelt on the expensive tile, heaving up nothing, and wondered how long a person could survive on water and stubbornness. When she finally emerged, Rachel was hovering outside her door with an expression that said she was about to commit career suicide. "Ms. Cole, I really think you should go home. You're clearly not well." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like you're about to pass out." "Rachel." Vivian's voice was ice, despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "I appreciate your concern, but I have a board presentation in 3 hours and I need to cancel it." The words came from behind Rachel. Both women turned to see Gerald Finch standing there, flanked by 2 other board members. His expression was a complicated mix of concern and something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Vivian, you look terrible. We're all worried about you." "I'm fine," she repeated automatically, even though they could all see it was a lie. "You're not fine," Gerald said, stepping closer. "And frankly, it's starting to affect your performance. We've noticed the late nights, the missed deadlines, the way you look like you haven't slept in weeks. We think you need to take some time off." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You're suspending me?" "We're concerned about you," one of the other board members said quickly. "About your health, about your ability to lead effectively while you're clearly struggling with something." "I'm not struggling with anything except a demanding job and a board that seems determined to undermine me at every opportunity." Gerald's expression hardened. "Vivian, we've built this company together. But we can't have a CEO who's falling apart in front of us. Take 2 weeks. See a doctor. Get whatever help you need. And then we'll talk about moving forward. And if I refuse, then we'll be forced to make this a formal medical leave, which looks much worse than you choosing to take time to focus on your health. Vivian looked between their faces, seeing calculation behind the concern. They'd been waiting for this, waiting for her to show weakness so they could swoop in and take control. She'd handed them exactly what they needed on a silver platter. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, 2 weeks, but I'm taking my laptop and staying accessible for emergencies. That's not the point of medical leave. That's the deal. Take it or I'll call my lawyer and we'll discuss the legality of forcing a CEO into leave without cause. Gerald's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 2 weeks. And Vivian? Actually rest. Please. After they left, she sat in her chair and stared at her desk. 14 days. 2 weeks to pull herself together or lose everything she'd built. No pressure. Rachel appeared in the doorway again, this time carrying Vivian's laptop bag and coat. I've cleared your calendar, delegated the urgent items, set up out-of-office replies. That was fast. I had them ready. At Vivian's sharp look, she added quickly, not because I thought this would happen, because I hoped you'd eventually take a break voluntarily. You work too hard, Miss Cole. Everyone knows it. Vivian took the bag and coat, too exhausted to argue. Thank you, Rachel. Take care of yourself. Actually, take care of yourself. Not just work from home instead of the office. The elevator ride down felt like descent into failure. Marcus's face when she emerged hours early confirmed it. He didn't ask questions, just drove her home in sympathetic silence. Back in her penthouse, Vivian stood in the middle of her living room and felt the full weight of what had just happened crash over her. She'd been suspended, forced into medical leave like someone who couldn't handle the pressure. The board had seen through her perfect facade and found her wanting. And the worst part? They were right. She was falling apart. Had been falling apart for months, years maybe. She'd just gotten so good at hiding it that even she'd started to believe her own lies, until a janitor with kind eyes and painful truths had held up a mirror she couldn't look away from. Different poison, same lies. Vivian pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She searched for help. Real help. Not the executive wellness retreats or luxury detox spas she'd always assumed were for people weaker than her, but actual medical assistance for people trying to quit addictions they could no longer control. The search results were overwhelming. Dozens of programs, clinics, support groups, all of them requiring her to admit she had a problem, to show weakness, to be seen in all her imperfect, struggling humanity. She was scrolling through options, hand trembling so badly she could barely hold the phone, when someone knocked on her door. For a confused moment, she wondered if the board had sent security to confiscate her laptop after all. But when she checked the video intercom, she saw Daniel Brooks standing in her hallway, looking uncomfortable but determined. She almost didn't answer. Almost let him stand there until he gave up and left. But something, curiosity or desperation, or the simple fact that she'd spent the last 12 hours completely alone with her demons, made her press the buzzer. When she opened the door, he held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I heard what happened at your office. Building security talks. So you came here to gloat? I came to help, if you want it. Help? She laughed, the sound bitter. From my janitor. How appropriate. If the dig hurt, he didn't show it. From someone who's been where you are. My wife wasn't the only addict in our marriage. I spent 2 years trying to drink away grief after she died. Lost my career, my house, nearly lost my daughter. I know what you're going through. The shaking, the nausea, the feeling like your skin doesn't fit right. I know how it feels to want something so badly you'd rather die than keep fighting. Vivian's anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion. Why do you care? You don't know me. I know you enough to see someone drowning. He shifted his weight, looking younger somehow. Vulnerable. Look, you can tell me to leave and I will. But I'm guessing right now you're alone in this giant penthouse, probably Googling rehab programs and trying to convince yourself you can white-knuckle through withdrawal without help. And I'm here to tell you that's a terrible idea. I'm fine. You're shaking so hard I can see it from here. When's the last time you ate? She couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Daniel sighed. Okay, I'm coming in. You're going to sit down before you fall down. And I'm going to make you toast because it's the only thing your stomach will tolerate right now. This is highly inappropriate. So is smoking on your office balcony at midnight. He stepped past her into the penthouse, looking around at the sterile perfection with something like sadness. Where's your kitchen? Too tired to argue, Vivian pointed. Then, because her legs were threatening to give out, she sank onto her uncomfortable designer couch and watched this janitor move through her space like he belonged there. He found bread, a toaster, butter, worked with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to kitchens. While bread toasted, he filled a glass with water and brought it to her. Drink. You're probably dehydrated from all the sweating and vomiting. She should have been mortified that he knew these details. Instead, she just felt grateful that someone understood what was happening to her body. The toast appeared a few minutes later, cut into triangles like she was a child. Daniel sat in the chair across from her, not on the couch, maintaining appropriate distance even as he violated every professional boundary they'd ever had. Eat, he said. Small bites. Your stomach's going to protest, but you need something in there. Why are you doing this? The question came out smaller than she intended. You don't owe me anything. I was awful to you. You were scared. People get mean when they're scared. He watched her take a tentative bite of toast. And I'm doing this because someone did it for me. Guy named Pete worked at the shelter where I ended up. Sat with me through the worst of it. Didn't judge, didn't lecture. Just showed up. Made toast. A slight smile. I figure I owe the universe some of that back. They sat in silence while Vivian slowly ate her way through one piece of toast. Her stomach did protest, violently at first, but the nausea gradually settled into something manageable. I got suspended today, she said finally. The board says I need medical leave. 2 weeks to get my act together. Good. She looked up sharply. Good? You need help, Ms. Cole. Professional help. This isn't something you can handle alone. I threw them away. The cigarettes. All of them. I can do this. Throwing them away is step one. Staying away from them is where it gets hard. You need support. Medical monitoring. Someone to call when it's 3 a.m. and you're convinced dying would be easier. I can't go to rehab. The publicity alone would destroy me. The board would use it as ammunition. My competitors would smell blood in the water. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So you'd rather destroy yourself quietly? Stay perfect on the outside while you rot from the inside? That's not strength, Ms. Cole. That's just fear. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand that you're worth more than your company. I understand that the people who actually matter won't care if you need help. And I understand that the ones who'd use your struggle against you aren't worth protecting your image for. Easy for you to say. You're not the one with everything to lose. His expression hardened. I lost everything. My wife, my career as an architect, my house, my self-respect. I lost it all because I was too proud and too scared to admit I needed help. And you know what? None of those things mattered as much as being there for my daughter, as being alive and functional enough to be her father. The words hung in the air between them. Vivian set down her half-eaten toast, her hands still trembling, but her mind suddenly, painfully clear. You were an architect? Past tense. Drinking doesn't mix well with structural calculations. Made some errors, got fired, spiraled harder. He shrugged. Been climbing back up for 3 years now. Cleaning jobs pay the bills while I work on getting my license back. I'm sorry. Don't be. I did it to myself. Just like you're doing this to yourself. The only difference is, you still have time to stop before you lose everything that matters. Vivian thought about her penthouse, her company, her reputation, all the things she'd built and protected and sacrificed for. Tried to imagine losing them and felt panic rise in her throat. But then she thought about standing on her balcony, alone in the dark, slowly poisoning herself. About the weight loss and the shaking and the way her body was staging increasingly desperate rebellions. About being so isolated that a janitor making toast felt like the most human connection she'd had in years. Maybe she'd already lost everything that mattered. Maybe she just hadn't admitted it yet. I don't know how to ask for help, she whispered. I've spent my entire life proving I don't need it. Needing help doesn't make you weak. Pretending you don't is what'll kill you. Daniel stood, pulling a card from his wallet. This is the outpatient program I used. They're good, discreet. They've worked with executives before. You can do sessions from home if publicity is a concern. She took the card, reading the simple text. Pathways Recovery Center, when you're ready to walk a different way. Call them, Daniel said. Today. Right now, while you're still too sick to talk yourself out of it. And if I don't? Then I'll come back tomorrow and make you more toast, and we'll have this conversation again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until you either get help or throw me out permanently. Why? The question was almost a plea. Why do you care this much about someone you barely know? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something raw and painful in his expression. Because my wife died alone. In a hospital room, surrounded by machines, while I was passed out drunk at home. She'd been sick for months, but I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see how bad it had gotten. And when they called to tell me she was gone, I realized I'd already lost her long before that. Lost her to my addiction and my pride and my absolute certainty that I could handle everything myself. His voice cracked. So when I see someone else drowning in the same lies I told myself, someone who still has a chance to choose different, I care. Because maybe if I help you, it'll balance the scales somehow, make up for all the times I didn't help her. Tears were streaming down Vivian's face now. She didn't try to stop them. I'm scared. Good. Being scared means you're still paying attention. He moved toward his door, then paused. Call them, Ms. Cole. Please. And eat the rest of that toast. You're going to need your strength for what comes next. After he left, Vivian sat on her couch holding the card and crying in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry since she was a child. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body and left her gasping for air. Mourning everything she'd lost while chasing success. All the connections she'd cut. All the moments she'd sacrificed. All the versions of herself she'd murdered in pursuit of perfection. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow, scraped clean, raw. And somehow, weirdly, ready. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card before she could overthink it. A woman answered on the second ring. Pathways Recovery Center, this is Maria. How can I help you today? Vivian opened her mouth and the truth came out, simple and terrible and freeing. My name is Vivian Cole, and I need help. The words hung in the air after she spoke them, impossible to take back. Maria's voice on the other end of the line was warm, professional, mercifully free of judgment. Thank you for calling, Vivian. That took courage. Can you tell me a little bit about what's brought you to us today? And just like that, the dam broke. Vivian found herself talking to this stranger about things she'd never admitted to anyone. The cigarettes hidden on her office balcony, the sleepless nights and racing heart, the way her hands shook and her body rebelled and her whole carefully constructed life was crumbling around her. Maria listened without interrupting, asking gentle questions that pulled more truth from Vivian than she'd intended to share. How long has it been since your last cigarette? Maria asked. 18 hours? Maybe 19. I threw them all away last night. And how are you feeling physically right now? Like I'm dying. Vivian's laugh was hollow. Shaking, nauseous, can't think straight. Is that normal? It's very normal. Nicotine withdrawal can be intense, especially if you've been a heavy smoker for a long time. Have you eaten anything today? Toast. A friend made me toast. Good. That's good. Listen, Vivian, I want to get you in to see one of our doctors as soon as possible. We can do a video consultation today if you're available. Get you started on a treatment plan, maybe prescribe something to help with the withdrawal symptoms. Would that work for you? Relief flooded through her. Yes, please. They scheduled a session for 3 o'clock that afternoon. After Vivian hung up, she sat staring at her phone, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd admitted weakness, asked for help, opened herself up to strangers who would see all the ugly, broken parts she'd spent years hiding. It should have felt like failure. Instead, it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in months. The video consultation was with Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that Vivian appreciated. She asked detailed questions about Vivian's smoking history, her physical symptoms, her mental state. took notes without flinching at any of Vivian's answers. Okay, Dr. Chen said after 20 minutes of thorough assessment. Here's what I'm seeing. You've been self-medicating with nicotine for years, using it to manage stress, suppress appetite, and cope with what sounds like pretty severe anxiety. The good news is you're young and otherwise healthy. Your body will recover. But you need support through this process. Trying to quit cold turkey without help is admirable, but potentially dangerous. Dangerous how? Nicotine withdrawal can trigger anxiety attacks, depression, even physical complications if your body's been dependent long enough. I'm going to prescribe a low-dose nicotine patch to help ease you off gradually, plus something for the anxiety. And I want to see you twice a week, either in person or via video. We'll also set you up with a therapist because the physical addiction is only part of this. Vivian bristled. I don't need therapy. I just need to stop smoking. Dr. Chen's expression was gentle but firm. Vivian, you didn't start smoking because you liked the taste. You started because it served a purpose. Until we address why you needed it, you're just going to replace it with something else. Maybe alcohol, maybe pills, maybe work addiction that's just as destructive. The goal isn't just to quit smoking. It's to build a life where you don't need to escape from yourself. The words hit harder than Vivian expected. A life where she didn't need to escape from herself. When had that stopped being her life? When had existing become something she needed to medicate? Okay, she said quietly. Therapy, whatever it takes. Good. I'm sending the prescriptions to a pharmacy near you. They'll deliver within 2 hours. In the meantime, I want you to drink water, eat small amounts every few hours, and be gentle with yourself. This is going to be hard, Vivian. Some days will feel impossible, but you can do this. After the call ended, Vivian sat in her silent penthouse and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd committed to. Recovery. Treatment. Admitting to a room full of strangers that perfect Vivian Cole was neither perfect nor particularly in control of her own life. Her phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. Did you call them? She typed back, yes, video appointment done, prescriptions on the way, thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, proud of you, that's the hard part. Everything else is just showing up. Something about those words, proud of you, made her chest tighten. When was the last time someone had been proud of her for being vulnerable instead of strong? For admitting failure instead of claiming victory? The medication arrived at 5 p.m. Vivian applied the nicotine patch with shaking hands, feeling both grateful for the relief it would bring and ashamed that she needed it. Within 30 minutes, the worst of the craving had dulled to something manageable. The anti-anxiety medication would take longer to work, Dr. Chen had warned, but knowing she had it helped somehow. She made herself eat dinner, soup from the expensive delivery service she normally never had time to use. Her stomach accepted it grudgingly. Small victories. That night, for the first time in years, Vivian went to bed at a reasonable hour. No laptop in bed, no emergency emails, no last-minute crisis management. Just clean sheets and darkness and the strange sensation of not being at war with her own body. She still didn't sleep well. The withdrawal dreams were vivid and disturbing, full of boardrooms where she showed up naked, of buildings crumbling beneath her feet, of drowning in an ocean of cigarette smoke while perfectly dressed executives watched from the shore. But when she woke at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, instead of giving up and working, she took the anti-anxiety pill Dr. Chen had prescribed for emergencies and focused on breathing until her heart rate slowed. Morning came eventually. Vivian woke feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, but the shaking had lessened and her mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. Progress, maybe. Or just the medication doing its job. She was making coffee, decaf, at Dr. Chen's suggestion, when someone knocked on her door. The intercom showed Daniel, this time with a small girl holding his hand. His daughter, Vivian realized, the reason he worked nights cleaning office buildings. She almost didn't answer. Wasn't sure she was ready to face him looking this rough, this unpolished, but he'd shown up for her when no one else had. The least she could do was open the door. Morning, Daniel said when she let them in. Sorry to ambush you. My regular sitter canceled and I wanted to check on you before my daughter's soccer practice. This is Emma. The girl was maybe 7 or 8, with her father's dark eyes and a gap-toothed smile. She looked around the penthouse with open curiosity. Wow, This is like a museum. Do you have any toys? Emma, Daniel warned. It's okay. Vivian found herself smiling despite everything. No toys, I'm afraid. I don't get many visitors your age. Or any age, Daniel said quietly, and Vivian couldn't argue. Emma had already wandered over to the windows, pressing her face against the glass to look down at the city. You can see everything from up here. Dad, can we live somewhere high up someday? Someday, kiddo. When I'm not cleaning other people's high-up places. He turned to Vivian. You look better, less like you're about to pass out. The medication helps, and I slept. Sort of. She poured herself coffee, offered Daniel some. He accepted, settling onto the couch with the casual comfort of someone who'd stopped being intimidated by her space. First therapy session is Monday, Vivian said, sitting in the chair across from him. Dr. Chen set me up with someone who specializes in high-functioning addicts, whatever that means. It means people who hide it well, who build whole successful lives around the thing that's killing them. Daniel sipped his coffee. I saw that therapist too, actually, Dr. Reeves. She's tough, but good. Won't let you intellectualize your way out of feeling things. Sounds terrible. It is, but it works. He glanced over at Emma, who was now examining Vivian's sparse bookshelf with the same intense curiosity she'd applied to everything else. You doing okay? Really? Vivian considered lying, defaulting to her automatic I'm fine. But something about Daniel's presence, the way he'd already seen her at her worst and stuck around anyway, made honesty feel possible. I'm terrified, she admitted, of failing, of people finding out, of losing control of my company while I'm trying to fix myself, of discovering that without work and achievement there's nothing else left of me worth saving. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds about right. You know what helped me? Realizing that the person I was before I broke wasn't actually that great. Successful, sure, but not happy, not whole, not someone Emma would have been proud to know. He looked at his daughter with such raw love it made Vivian's chest ache. Breaking down gave me a chance to build back different, better. But you lost everything. I lost things. And I gained things, like actually being present for my kid instead of drunk or absent, or too wrapped up in my own ego to see her. Like friendships with people who know the real me, not just the architect version. Like self-respect I didn't have to fake. He met Vivian's eyes. You won't lose everything. You might lose some things, but maybe they're things that were costing you more than they were worth. Emma bounded back over, holding one of Vivian's untouched art books. Can I look at this? It has pretty pictures. Sure. Vivian watched the girl settle on the floor, carefully turning pages like the book was precious. She's wonderful. You're lucky. I know. She's the reason I got sober. The reason I stayed sober. Daniel's voice went soft. After her mom died, I had a choice. Be the parent she needed or drown in grief and leave her with nothing. Some days it was close, but she deserved better than a drunk dad who was too broken to show up for her. How did you do it? Make that choice? One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. On the really bad days, 1 minute at a time. He set down his coffee cup. And I let people help. Pete at the shelter. My AA sponsor. Emma's teacher who noticed I was struggling and connected me with resources. The social worker who helped me navigate custody while I was barely functional. I had to swallow my pride and accept that I couldn't do it alone. Vivian thought about her own life, the careful isolation she'd cultivated, the way she'd systematically cut off anyone who might see through her perfect facade, the loneliness she'd convinced herself was strength. I don't have people, she said quietly. I have employees and board members and competitors, but not people. You have me, Daniel said simply. If you want. No ulterior motive, no expectations, just someone who's been in the pit and knows the way out. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Because 3 years ago, I was where you are. And someone showed up for me who barely knew me. Pete didn't have to spend hours sitting with me while I detoxed. Didn't have to check on me every day for months. Didn't have to believe I could be better than I was. But he did. And it saved my life. Daniel stood, checking his watch. I should get Emma to practice. But I'm serious, Vivian. You need someone to call at 3 a.m. when the cravings are unbearable? Call me. You need someone to sit with you while you go to a meeting? I'll be there. No judgment, no strings. After they left, the penthouse felt even emptier than usual. Vivian stood at her window looking out at the city and tried to imagine a version of her life that included actual human connection. Friends who knew the messy truth and stayed anyway. Support that didn't come with conditions or expectations. It seemed impossible, like a language she'd never learned to speak. But maybe that was the point of therapy. Learning to be human again. Her phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. Vivian almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Miss Cole, I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. I know you're on leave, but I thought you should know. Gerald Finch has been making moves. He's been in meetings with the CFO and head of product. I think he's trying to position himself to take over permanently. The old Vivian would have panicked, would have grabbed her laptop and started damage control, medical leave or not, would have proved she was indispensable by making herself available even when her body was falling apart. Instead, she took a breath. Thanks for the heads up, Rachel, but I need to trust that 2 weeks away won't destroy what I've built. And if it does, maybe it wasn't as strong as I thought. Silence on the other end. Ms. Cole, are you feeling okay? That doesn't sound like you. I'm trying to be less like me, or less like the me I've been. Vivian moved away from the window, toward the couch where Emma had sat looking at art books like they were treasures. How are things otherwise? The team managing okay? Oh, yeah, actually better than expected. Turns out people are capable of making decisions without running everything by you first. Who knew? Rachel's tone was teasing, gentle. We miss you, though, the real you. Not the version who answered emails at midnight and looked like she might shatter if someone breathed wrong. Is that how I seemed? Like I might shatter? For months now, yeah. We were all worried, but nobody knew how to say anything without risking their job. Rachel hesitated. I'm glad you're taking time. Really glad. Whatever you're dealing with, you deserve to deal with it without the weight of the whole company on your shoulders. After they hung up, Vivian sat with that. People had noticed, had worried, had been scared to reach out because she'd made herself so unapproachable, so untouchable, so determinedly fine that offering help seemed like an insult. She'd done that to herself. Built walls so high that nobody could reach her, then wondered why she felt alone. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Vivian followed Dr. Chen's instructions. Medication on schedule, small meals every few hours, gentle walks around her neighborhood instead of her usual punishing exercise routine. She read the materials from Pathways Recovery about addiction and recovery and the stages of withdrawal. Prepared herself mentally for Monday's therapy session. On Sunday evening, she was making dinner, actually cooking, something she hadn't done in her own kitchen in months, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Miss Cole, it's Emma, Dad's phone. He said you might need a friend. Do you want to see a picture of my soccer trophy? We won yesterday. The message was followed by a slightly blurry photo of Emma holding a small gold trophy, grinning like she'd won the World Cup. Vivian stared at the photo for a long moment, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. Then she typed back, Congratulations, Emma. That's wonderful. You must have played really well. I scored 2 goals. Dad says I'm going to be a professional someday. Do you like soccer? I've never really watched it, but I'd like to learn. You should come to my next game. Dad can bring you. It's next Saturday at 10. Vivian's first instinct was to decline, to maintain appropriate boundaries with the janitor and his daughter, to keep her life compartmentalized and controlled. Instead, she wrote, I'd like that. Thank you for inviting me. When Daniel's number called a few minutes later, Vivian answered already smiling. Sorry about that, he said, sounding embarrassed. She grabbed my phone when I was in the bathroom. Kid has no boundaries when she decides someone is her friend. It's okay. I told her I'd come to her game on Saturday. If that's all right with you. You don't have to. I know, but I'd like to, if the offer stands. Silence, then. Yeah, the offer stands. Fair warning, though, 7-year-old soccer is chaotic and mostly involves kids running in a pack chasing the ball. Not exactly executive entertainment. Good. I could use some chaos that isn't life-threatening. Vivian stirred the pasta she was making, marveling at how normal this felt. Talking on the phone while cooking dinner. Making plans to watch a child's soccer game. Things regular people did without thinking twice. Daniel, thank you for everything, for not giving up on me. You made the hard choices yourself. I just held the door open. His voice softened. You're doing great, Vivian. Better than you think. Monday morning arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Vivian's first therapy session was at 10 a.m. She spent an hour beforehand pacing her penthouse, changing outfits 3 times, trying to decide what version of herself to present to Dr. Reeves. Finally, she settled on simple jeans and a sweater. No armor, no corporate power suit, just Vivian, whoever that was underneath all the careful construction. The video call connected at exactly 10 a.m. Dr. Reeves was younger than Vivian expected, maybe late 40s, with short silver hair and an expression that managed to be both welcoming and no-nonsense. Vivian, good to meet you. Dr. Chen filled me in on the basics, but I'd like to hear your story in your own words. Why don't you start by telling me what brought you here? So Vivian told her about the cigarettes and the sleepless nights, and the way success had hollowed her out until there was nothing left but achievement and fear. About Daniel finding her on the balcony and refusing to look away. About the board forcing medical leave and the terror of losing everything she'd built. Dr. Reeves listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When Vivian finished, she sat back and studied her for a moment. That's quite a story. Can I ask you something? When you talk about losing everything, what exactly are you afraid of losing? My company, my reputation, my position, everything I've worked for. Okay, and if you lost all of that tomorrow, who would you be? The question stopped Vivian cold. I don't know. Exactly. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. That's the real problem, Vivian, not the cigarettes, not even the anxiety or the sleepless nights. The problem is that you've built your entire identity on external achievements. You don't know who you are without them. So the thought of losing them feels like death because in a very real way, it would be death. Death of the only self you know. Vivian felt tears starting. So what do I do? You figure out who Vivian Cole is when she's not performing, not achieving, not proving anything to anyone. Dr. Reeves's voice was gentle but firm. You find the person underneath the CEO, the human being who exists regardless of title or net worth or board approval, and you learn to value her for reasons that have nothing to do with success. I don't know how to do that. I know, that's why you're here, that's the work. Dr. Reeves pulled up something on her screen. I want to try an exercise. I want you to finish this sentence. I matter because I built a successful company. No, try again without referencing achievement. I matter because I'm smart. Intelligence is still an achievement metric. Try again. Vivian struggled. Every answer that came to mind was tied to what she'd done, what she'd accomplished, how she'd proven her worth. She couldn't think of a single reason she mattered that wasn't conditional on performance. I can't, she finally whispered. I don't know why I matter if not for what I've achieved. And there it is. Dr. Reeves' expression was sad but not pitying. That's the wound we're going to heal, because you do matter, Vivian. Not because of your company or your money or your success. You matter because you're a human being, and human beings have inherent worth. But you're going to have to learn to believe that, really believe it, not just intellectually understand it. The session continued for another 40 minutes, digging into Vivian's childhood, her relationship with her parents, the messages she'd internalized about worth and value, and what it meant to be enough. By the time they finished, Vivian felt exhausted and raw and strangely hopeful. Homework for this week, Dr. Reeves said as they wrapped up. I want you to do one thing every day that has no productive purpose. No goal, no achievement, no outcome. Just something you enjoy for its own sake. Can you do that? Like what? Whatever you want. Watch clouds. Take a bath. Listen to music. The point is to practice being instead of doing, to exist without performing. After the session ended, Vivian sat at her window and thought about the assignment. One thing every day that served no purpose except joy. The concept felt foreign, almost transgressive, but she'd committed to this process, to changing, to finding out who she was underneath all the armor. She pulled out her phone and opened her music app. Hadn't listened to music in months except as background noise during workouts, but she used to love it back in college. Used to spend hours discovering new artists, losing herself in albums. She put in earbuds and pressed play on a playlist the algorithm suggested based on her ancient listening history. The first song was something indie and melancholy, all gentle guitar and aching vocals about learning to be soft in a hard world. Vivian closed her eyes and just listened. Not while doing email or reviewing reports or multitasking, just listening, being present with the music and nothing else. It felt uncomfortable at first. Her mind kept trying to wander, to find something productive to do with this time. But she forced herself to stay present, to feel each note, to let the lyrics wash over her without analysis or judgment. By the third song, something in her chest loosened. By the fifth, she was crying again, but softer this time. Gentler. Mourning not for what she was losing, but for all the years she'd spent running too fast to feel anything real. This was what she'd been missing, not achievement or success or validation from strangers, but this. The simple, profound experience of being alive and present and human. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "How'd it go?" She wiped her eyes and typed back, "Hard, good. I'm listening to music and crying on my couch, and it's somehow exactly what I needed." That's recovery in a nutshell. Welcome to feeling things. It sucks, and it's beautiful, and it's the whole point. Vivian smiled through her tears, still listening to her music, still sitting with the discomfort of just being. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't running from herself. She was staying, present, imperfect, struggling, but staying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days that followed developed a rhythm Vivian had never experienced before. Not the frantic pace of corporate deadlines and endless meetings, but something slower, more deliberate. Morning started with medication and breakfast, actual breakfast, not coffee gulped down while reading emails. Therapy sessions twice a week with Dr. Reeves, who had a gift for asking questions that left Vivian feeling flayed open and strangely relieved. Daily check-ins with Dr. Chen to monitor her physical symptoms as her body slowly purged itself of nicotine's grip. And every evening, around 6 o'clock, Daniel would text. Nothing intrusive, just a simple "how's today?" that somehow became the anchor point of her day. By Wednesday, Vivian had managed to go 48 hours without obsessively checking work emails. By Thursday, she'd taken a walk through her neighborhood and actually noticed things. A corner bakery she'd driven past 1,000 times. A small park with mothers and toddlers, the way afternoon light hit the buildings just before sunset. Small observations that normal people made every day, but that felt like revelations to someone who'd spent years moving through the world without actually seeing it. Friday morning brought her second therapy session. Dr. Reeves opened with the question that was becoming familiar. "Tell me about your week. What did you notice?" "I'm sleeping better," Vivian said. 4, sometimes 5 hours straight. That hasn't happened in years, and the shaking has mostly stopped except when I'm stressed." "Good. And the homework? One thing daily, just for enjoyment?" Vivian felt oddly proud as she listed them. "Music on Monday. A bath with actual bath salts on Tuesday. I didn't even know I owned bath salts. Wednesday. I sat in that park near my building and watched people. Yesterday, I cooked an actual meal from a recipe I found online. It was terrible, but I ate it anyway." Dr. Reeves smiled. "And how did those activities feel?" "Weird, uncomfortable, like I was wasting time." Vivian paused, choosing her words carefully. "But also kind of peaceful? Like my brain could finally stop running so fast. That's your nervous system learning to regulate again. You've been in fight or flight mode for so long that calm feels foreign." Dr. Reeves made a note. "Let's talk about something harder. Have you thought any more about our question from Monday? About who you are without achievement?" The question still made Vivian's stomach twist. "I've been trying, but every answer I come up with feels hollow. Like I'm making up a person I think I should be rather than discovering who I actually am." "That's because you're still thinking about it instead of experiencing it. Identity isn't something you figure out intellectually. It's something you live into." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Tell me about Daniel and his daughter. You mentioned them last session." "Emma invited me to her soccer game tomorrow. I said yes." "Why?" The question caught Vivian off guard. "Because..." She asked, because it seemed nice? But you could have said no. You've presumably said no to hundreds of invitations over the years. What made this different? Vivian thought about Emma's gap-toothed smile, the way she'd looked at Vivian's sterile penthouse with such open curiosity instead of judgment, about Daniel making toast and refusing to let her drown alone, about the way being around them made her feel less like a CEO and more like a person. They don't need anything from me, she said slowly. They're not trying to get access or favors or my money. They just see me, and they don't seem to mind what they see. And how does that feel? Terrifying. Like I might disappoint them. Like they might realize I'm not worth their time. Or, Dr. Reeves prompted, or they might keep seeing me anyway, keep showing up, even when I'm a mess. Vivian's voice caught. I don't know how to handle that. People who stay without expecting me to earn it. That's called relationship, Vivian. Connection. The thing you've been avoiding by making yourself indispensable but unknowable. Dr. Reeves' expression softened. You're afraid that if people really know you, not CEO you, but actual struggling human you, they'll leave. So you've spent your whole life making sure no one gets close enough to find out. But Daniel already knows the worst, and he's still texting you every day. Emma already saw your empty apartment and invited you to her soccer game anyway. What does that tell you? That maybe I'm wrong about being fundamentally unlovable? Or that you were never unlovable to begin with? You were just convinced you had to earn love through achievement. And that's exhausting, Vivian. It's literally killing you. The session continued, digging deeper into Vivian's childhood patterns and the messages she'd internalized about worth. By the time it ended, she felt wrung out, but oddly lighter, like speaking painful truths aloud had released some of their power over her. She was making lunch, another real meal, progress, when her phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Vivian hesitated, then answered. Ms. Cole, I know I'm not supposed to bother you, but something's happened and I thought you should know before you hear it from someone else. Vivian's heart rate spiked. What happened? Gerald went to the board yesterday, proposed a restructuring plan that would essentially make him acting CEO for the next quarter. He's saying you're unable to fulfill your duties and the company needs stable leadership. The old panic rose, sharp and familiar. Her company, her position, everything she'd built being taken away while she was trying to put herself back together. She should have known this would happen. Should have stayed connected, stayed in control, should have... Ms. Cole, you still there? Vivian took a breath, fighting against the spiral. Yeah, I'm here. What did the board say? They tabled it, told Gerald that 2 weeks wasn't long enough to make that kind of decision. But Vivian, he's building support. By the time you come back, he might have the votes. Okay. The word came out calmer than Vivian felt. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate it. That's it? You're not going to do anything? What would you suggest I do, Rachel? Storm back into the office and prove I'm fine when I'm clearly not? Make them choose between a CEO who's falling apart in front of them and one who's at least pretending to have it together? Silence. Then quietly, no, you're right. I don't want to see him win. Maybe he won't. Maybe the board will see through whatever game he's playing. And if they don't, Vivian surprised herself with what came next. Then maybe I wasn't meant to lead that company forever. Maybe there are other things I'm supposed to do with my life. After she hung up, Vivian sat with the churning anxiety in her gut. Every instinct screamed at her to grab her laptop, start making calls, remind the board why they needed her. But Dr. Reeves's voice echoed in her head. You've built your entire identity on external achievements. What happens when you let go? She was about to find out. Instead of spiraling into crisis management, Vivian did something she'd never done before. She called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Hey, everything okay? Not really. The admission felt dangerous. The board might replace me. My VP is making moves and I'm sitting here making sandwiches instead of fighting back, and I don't know if I'm being healthy or just giving up. Where are you right now? My apartment. Why? I'm picking Emma up from school in 20 minutes. Come with us. Get out of your head for a few hours. I can't just... Yes, you can. That's the whole point of medical leave. Choosing something besides work. His voice gentled. Come on, Vivian. When's the last time you just existed for an afternoon without it being productive or strategic? She couldn't remember. Maybe never. Okay, she heard herself say. Text me where to meet you. 20 minutes later, Vivian found herself standing outside an elementary school, surrounded by parents and nannies and the chaotic energy of dismissal time. She felt wildly out of place in her jeans and sweater, no armor, no role to play. Just a woman waiting for a man she barely knew to pick up a child who'd somehow decided they were friends. Daniel appeared from the parking lot, waving when he spotted her. You came. Wasn't sure you would. Neither was I. Vivian watched the school doors where kids were starting to stream out. I got a call earlier. Work stuff. Bad news. And my first instinct was to spiral, but instead I called you. I don't know if that's progress or avoidance. Maybe both. That's allowed. Daniel gestured toward the crowd. Fair warning. Emma's going to be excited you're here. She's been talking about you all week. Apparently you're the lady who lives in the sky and doesn't have any toys but seems nice anyway. Despite everything, Vivian laughed. That's probably the most accurate description of me anyone's ever given. Emma emerged from the building like a small whirlwind, backpack bouncing, immediately scanning the crowd for her father. When she spotted Vivian, her whole face lit up. You came! Dad said you might be too busy, but you came! She grabbed Vivian's hand with the unselfconscious affection of a child who hadn't learned yet that some people don't like to be touched. Are you coming to the park with us? We go every Friday. Dad lets me play while he does boring phone calls for his architecture stuff. Vivian looked at Daniel. Architecture stuff? I'm working on getting my license reinstated. Have to log mentorship hours with a licensed architect, which means a lot of phone supervision while I work on practice projects. He shrugged. It's slow going, but it's going. They walked to a nearby park, Emma chattering the entire way about her day, her teacher, a friend who'd shared cookies at lunch, the injustice of only getting 15 minutes of recess. Vivian found herself actually listening, engaged by the simple earnestness of a child's worldview, where the biggest crisis was insufficient playground time. At the park, Emma immediately ran toward the swings while Daniel settled on a bench with his phone and a folder of what looked like blueprints. Vivian sat beside him, watching Emma pump her legs, going higher and higher with the fearless determination of someone who'd never learned to be afraid of falling. She's remarkable, Vivian said. She is. Keeps me honest. Hard to lie to yourself about being fine when you've got a 7-year-old asking why you're sad, or why you're not eating, or why you keep staring at nothing. Daniel glanced over at her. Want to talk about the work thing? Vivian told him about Gerald's power play, the board's indecision, her own paralyzing uncertainty about what to do. Daniel listened without interrupting, the same quality of presence he'd brought to her penthouse that first night. So what do you want to happen? He asked when she finished. I want my company back. I want to prove I can handle it. I want... She stopped, caught by the realization forming. I want to matter. And I only know how to matter by being CEO. Okay, but what if you matter anyway? What if your value has nothing to do with your title? He pointed toward Emma, who was now attempting to swing high enough to touch the sky. She matters because she exists, because she's kind and funny and brave, not because of what she achieves. You think any different rules apply to you? Yes. No, I don't know. Vivian pressed her palms to her eyes. I know intellectually that worth isn't conditional on achievement, but I don't feel it. It's like you're speaking a foreign language and I can't quite translate it into something I understand. Then maybe stop trying to understand it and just practice living it. Daniel set down his blueprints. You're here right now, on a Friday afternoon, watching a kid play on swings. You're not being productive. You're not achieving anything. You're not even being particularly strategic. You're just here. And you matter just as much in this moment as you did in any boardroom. Maybe more, because this is real. This is you being human. The words settled into Vivian's chest, not as revelation, but as gentle challenge. Could she matter without performing? Could she exist without proving? Could she just be Vivian, whoever that was, and have it be enough? She didn't have an answer, but sitting there in the afternoon sun, Watching Emma laugh and Daniel sketch notes on his blueprints, she felt something shift. Not dramatic transformation, just a small, subtle relaxation of the grip she'd been holding on her own throat for years. "Emma asked if you wanted to have dinner with us," Daniel said after a while. "Nothing fancy, just pizza and whatever movie she's obsessed with this week. You can say no. No pressure." The old Vivian would have said no, would have maintained appropriate boundaries, kept her private life private, avoided the messiness of actual connection. But the old Vivian was the one who'd been slowly dying on her office balcony, alone with her secrets and her shame. "I'd like that," Vivian said, "if you're sure it's not an imposition." "Vivian, you're literally the only adult friend I have who isn't a sponsor or a therapist. Trust me, it's not an imposition." They ended up at a small pizza place near Daniel's apartment, which was nothing like Vivian's penthouse. It was warm and cluttered and full of evidence of actual life being lived. Emma's drawings on the fridge, dishes in the sink, a pile of library books on the coffee table. Vivian found herself relaxing in a way she never did in her own perfectly curated space. Emma dominated the conversation during dinner, telling elaborate stories about school and her friends and the injustice of bedtime. Daniel translated when needed, his running commentary making Vivian laugh more than she had in months. And then Madison said, "I couldn't be the princess because I didn't have the right shoes, but I told her princesses can wear sneakers if they want because it's a free country, and also glass slippers are impractical for running from dragons." "Very pragmatic," Vivian agreed solemnly. "Exactly, that's what I said. But she didn't listen, so I had to be the dragon instead, which was actually more fun anyway because dragons can fly and breathe fire and they don't have to worry about princes." After dinner, they watched Emma's current favorite movie, something animated involving talking animals and improbable adventures. Vivian sat on the couch with Emma curled against her side like it was the most natural thing in the world, and tried to remember the last time she'd just existed in the moment, without her mind racing ahead to the next crisis. Halfway through the movie, Emma fell asleep, her head heavy on Vivian's shoulder. Daniel carefully lifted his daughter and carried her to bed, while Vivian sat in the warm living room, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of other people's lives. When Daniel returned, he found her staring at one of Emma's drawings on the wall, a family portrait done in crayon, showing Daniel and Emma holding hands under a smiling sun. "She's talented," Vivian said. "She's 7. They're all talented at 7." But his voice was warm with pride. He sat down beside her, leaving comfortable distance. "Thank you for tonight. Emma really likes you. Keeps asking when the Sky Lady is coming back." "The Sky Lady? You live up high. Kid logic." He paused. "How are you feeling? About earlier? The work stuff?" Vivian considered the question honestly. "Still scared, still uncertain, but less like I'm drowning in it. Being here helped. Watching Emma be so completely herself without apology or performance. It makes my crisis feel smaller somehow. Not unimportant, just not the only thing that matters. That's wisdom. Don't waste it." Daniel stood, got them both water from the kitchen. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. Whatever happens with the company, you're doing the work, showing up, letting people in. That's harder than running a business." "Is it, though? Because running a business feels impossible right now, and I used to do it without thinking. Because you were running on fumes and adrenaline and whatever else you were using to avoid feeling things. Now you're trying to do it while actually being present in your own life. Of course it's harder, but it's also the only way it's sustainable." Vivian looked around the small apartment, at the drawings and the dishes, and the evidence of a life being lived with intention and care. "How did you do it? Rebuild after losing everything?" "One choice at a time. Some days the choice was getting out of bed. Some days it was not drinking. Some days it was showing up for Emma even when I felt like I had nothing to give." He met her eyes. "And I let it be messy. Let myself be messy. That was the hardest part. Accepting that I didn't have to have all the answers or be perfectly recovered before I was allowed to move forward. I don't know how to be messy. You're learning. Tonight was messy. Showing up without a plan, eating pizza with strangers, watching kids' movies. That's not CEO behavior. That's just human behavior. And you did it anyway." Vivian stayed longer than she'd intended, talking with Daniel about recovery and rebuilding and the strange terror of not knowing who you were without your armor. When she finally called a car to take her home, Emma appeared in the hallway, sleepy and rumpled. "Are you leaving?" she asked, voice small. "I am, but I'll see you tomorrow at your soccer game. Remember? Promise?" The word hung in the air, weighted with all the promises Vivian had broken to herself and others over the years. All the commitments she'd made and failed to keep because work always came first. But looking at Emma's hopeful face, she found herself meaning it. Promise. Saturday morning arrived bright and unreasonably early. Vivian showed up at the soccer field at 9:45, clutching a coffee she wasn't entirely sure she should be drinking, but needed anyway. The field was chaos. Dozens of small children in mismatched uniforms, parents with lawn chairs and team snacks, coaches trying to organize kids who seemed more interested in cartwheels than soccer. Daniel spotted her and waved, pointing to where he'd set up near the sideline. Vivian made her way over, feeling absurdly out of place and oddly content about it. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I promised." Vivian sat in the folding chair he offered. "Fair warning, I know nothing about soccer. I might be a terrible spectator. The bar is low. Basically just cheer when our team has the ball and try not to critique their strategic errors too loudly. These are 7-year-olds, not professionals." The game was exactly as chaotic as Daniel had warned. Kids ran in enthusiastic packs, occasionally kicking the ball, more often just running because running was fun. Emma played with fierce determination, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she chased the ball up and down the field. Vivian found herself actually invested, cheering when Emma's team scored, groaning when they missed. It was absurd and pointless, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so present. Halfway through the second half, her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Board meeting Monday at 9 a.m. Gerald's pushing for a vote. I think you should be there." Vivian stared at the message, anxiety rising. Monday. 2 days away. The moment of truth about whether she still had a company to return to. "Bad news?" Daniel asked, noticing her expression. "Board meeting Monday. Decision time about my future." She put the phone away. "I should probably prepare, figure out what I'm going to say, make a plan. Or you could watch the rest of this game and deal with Monday on Monday." "That's not how I operate." "I know, but maybe it should be." He gestured toward the field where Emma had just stolen the ball from an opposing player. "Look, whatever happens Monday, it happens. You spending the next 2 days spiraling won't change the outcome, but it will steal these 2 days from you. Is that what you want?" Vivian watched Emma pass the ball to a teammate, watched the teammate miss the kick spectacularly, watched Emma laugh instead of getting frustrated. 7 years old and already better at rolling with disappointment than Vivian had ever been. "No," she said finally. "That's not what I want." "Then stay. Watch the game. Have lunch with us after. Exist in the present instead of the maybe future." Daniel's voice was gentle. "The board meeting will still be there Monday, but this moment won't." So Vivian stayed. Watched Emma's team win by 2 goals. Celebrated with enthusiastic high fives and fruit snacks. Had lunch at a diner where Emma recounted every play in exhaustive detail. Spent the afternoon at the park again, this time pushing Emma on the swings while Daniel worked on his architecture portfolio. And for those hours, Vivian didn't think about the board or Gerald or what Monday would bring. She just existed in the warm present, being the sky lady who kept her promises, and learned what it meant to show up for people who expected nothing from her except herself. When she finally got home that evening, exhausted and oddly peaceful, there was a message from Dr. Reeves. "Reminder, session Monday at 8 a.m. before your board meeting. We'll talk about whatever happens and what it means for your recovery. You're doing good work, Vivian. Don't forget that regardless of what the board decides." Vivian read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. You're doing good work, not achieving impressive results or meeting expectations or proving worth, just doing good work. Being human, showing up. Maybe that could be enough. Maybe it already was. Sunday passed in a strange suspension between peace and anxiety. Vivian tried to follow Daniel's advice about staying present, spending the morning cooking an elaborate breakfast she barely tasted, the afternoon reading a book she couldn't quite focus on. But her mind kept drifting to Monday, to the board meeting that would decide whether she still had a company to lead or whether Gerald Finch would finally get what he'd been angling for all along. By evening, she gave up pretending she wasn't terrified. She pulled out her laptop and started drafting talking points, arguments for why the board should keep her on, evidence of her value to the company. But every word felt hollow. How could she prove she was ready to return when she still felt like she was barely holding herself together? Her phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "I can hear you spiraling from across the city," he said when she answered. "I'm not spiraling. I'm preparing. You're catastrophizing. There's a difference." She heard Emma's voice in the background, something about bath time. "Look, I know tomorrow is huge, but you've already survived the hardest part. You asked for help. You did the work. Whatever the board decides doesn't change that. It changes whether I have a career. It changes whether you have that specific job at that specific company. That's not the same as your entire career." His voice gentled. "Vivian, what's the worst thing that could actually happen tomorrow?" She'd been avoiding that question. "They vote me out. Gerald becomes CEO. I lose everything I built." "Okay, and then what?" "Then I don't know, start over, find another company, prove them wrong? Or maybe you discover there's a whole life waiting for you that doesn't revolve around being CEO. Maybe you find out you're more than your job title." He paused. "I'm not saying losing the company wouldn't hurt. I'm saying it wouldn't destroy you. You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone anymore." After they hung up, Vivian closed her laptop and stood at her window watching the city lights. Daniel was right. The worst-case scenario wasn't actually death or destruction. It was just change. Painful, unwanted change, but change she could survive. The question was whether she wanted to spend her last night before the meeting drowning in anxiety or choosing something different. She picked up her phone and did something she never would have done 2 weeks ago. She texted Emma. "Thank you for inviting me to your soccer game. I had more fun than I've had in a long time. Sleep well tonight and dream big." The response came almost immediately. "Dad says you have a big meeting tomorrow. You're going to do great because you're really smart and also nice." Emma. Vivian read the message 3 times, something warm spreading through her chest. A 7-year-old's faith felt more substantial than any board approval ever had. She slept better that night than she expected. When her alarm went off at 6:30 Monday morning, she felt clear-headed despite the nerves. The therapy session with Dr. Reeves was at 8, giving her an hour and a half to get ready and center herself. She chose her clothes carefully. Not armor this time, no severe suit or corporate uniform, but not casual either. She settled on tailored pants and a soft sweater, professional but human, the woman she was becoming instead of the one she'd been. Dr. Reeves started the session with her usual directness. "How are you feeling about today?" Terrified, determined, weirdly calm underneath the panic. Vivian settled into her chair, the video call feeling almost comfortable now. "I keep trying to prepare what to say, but every argument feels like I'm defending the old version of myself, the one who was falling apart." "Maybe because you are. The board suspended you because you were burning out. If you go in there arguing that you're fine, that nothing needs to change, you're just proving their point." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "What if instead of defending the old Vivian, you showed them the new one, the person who recognized she had a problem and got help, who chose health over image, who's learning to lead from a place of wholeness instead of desperation? What if they see that as weakness? Then they're not people you want to work for anyway." Dr. Reeves's expression was kind but firm. "Vivian, you've spent 2 weeks doing the hardest work of your life. You've faced your addiction, started therapy, built actual human connections. You've chosen to be vulnerable and real instead of perfect and isolated. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength most people never develop." "But what if it's not enough? What if they vote me out anyway?" "Then you'll survive. You'll be devastated and angry and scared, and then you'll figure out what comes next. Because that's what you do now. You feel things, and you move through them instead of medicating them away." Dr. Reeves glanced at her notes. "Remember our first session? You couldn't answer why you mattered beyond your achievements. Can you answer it now?" Vivian thought about the past 2 weeks, about Daniel making toast and refusing to give up on her, about Emma inviting her to soccer games and calling her the Sky Lady, about Dr. Chen's patience and Dr. Reeves's tough questions and the slow, painful process of learning to exist without performing. I matter because I'm learning to be honest, she said slowly, because I'm choosing to get better even when it's hard, because I showed up for Emma's soccer game and kept my promise, because I'm trying to be a whole person instead of just a successful one. And does your job title change any of that? No. The realization settled into her bones. No, it doesn't. Then go into that meeting knowing who you are regardless of what they decide. You're not going as Vivian Cole who needs their approval to matter. You're going as Vivian Cole who's doing the work to become healthy and whole. Whether they appreciate that is on them, not you. The session ended at 8:50, giving Vivian 10 minutes to get to her office building. She'd asked Marcus to drive her, needing the familiar presence. He'd simply nodded when she got in the car, his kind eyes saying everything words couldn't. The building felt different as she walked through the lobby, or maybe she was different. People nodded as she passed, some with genuine warmth, others with the careful neutrality of colleagues unsure how to behave around a CEO on medical leave. Rachel was waiting by the elevator, her expression a mix of relief and worry. "Miss Cole, you look good, really good, actually." "Thank you, Rachel." Vivian meant it. "I feel better than I have in a long time." "The board's already in the conference room. Gerald's been here since 7, talking to everyone who'll listen." Rachel lowered her voice. "I think he's got 3 solid votes. You need 5 to maintain your position." "Okay." Vivian pressed the elevator button, surprised by how steady her hands were. "Whatever happens, Rachel, thank you for caring enough to keep me informed even when I was too stubborn to see I needed help." The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. Vivian used the time to breathe, to remember Dr. Reeves's words, to ground herself in the truth of who she was becoming instead of who she'd been. The conference room was exactly as she remembered. Same long table, same leather chairs, same view of Los Angeles spreading endlessly below. The board members looked up when she entered, their expressions ranging from relieved to calculating to openly hostile. Gerald Finch sat at the far end, his posture screaming confidence. He'd already won in his mind, already started planning his regime. "Vivian," the board chairman said, standing, "we're glad you could join us. Please, sit." She took her usual seat at the head of the table, the position she'd fought so hard to claim and hold. But this time, she didn't feel like she was fighting. She felt like she was simply showing up as herself. "First," the chairman continued, "we want to say we're glad to see you looking well. We were concerned about you." "Thank you. I appreciate that concern. And you were right to be worried." Vivian met each board member's eyes in turn. "I was burning out, using unhealthy coping mechanisms, running myself into the ground while pretending everything was fine. Taking medical leave was the right call." Gerald leaned forward, scenting blood. "And are you ready to return? Because the company needs strong, stable leadership, not someone who might relapse at any moment." "I'm in active treatment for nicotine addiction and anxiety," Vivian said calmly. "I see a therapist twice a week and a physician weekly. I've learned to set boundaries and ask for help. I'm building a support system and developing healthier ways of managing stress. So no, I'm not the same leader I was 2 weeks ago. I'm better." "Better?" Gerald's laugh was sharp. "You're admitting to addiction and therapy on the record. Do you have any idea what that does to our image? To investor confidence?" "I know exactly what it does. It shows we're a company that values human beings over performance metrics, that we recognize mental health and physical health are equally important, that we're willing to be honest about struggles instead of hiding them until they become catastrophes." Vivian kept her voice level. "And if our investors have a problem with that, they're invested in the wrong company." One of the board members spoke up, a woman named Patricia, who'd always been fair if distant. "Vivian, we respect your honesty, but Gerald raises a valid concern. How do we know you can handle the pressure moving forward, that you won't fall back into old patterns?" "You don't. I don't even know that myself." Vivian felt the truth of it. "What I do know is that I'm committed to doing this job differently. That means delegating more instead of trying to control everything. It means leaving at reasonable hours and actually using my vacation time. It means being honest when I'm struggling instead of hiding it until I collapse." That sounds like doing less, Gerald interjected. The company needs a CEO who's all in, not someone treating this like a 9-to-5 job. The company needs a CEO who's sustainable. Vivian turned to face him directly. I was all in, Gerald. I worked 80-hour weeks. I never took breaks. I sacrificed everything for this company. And you know what happened? I got sick. I made decisions from a place of exhaustion and fear instead of clarity and vision. I was one bad day away from a complete breakdown that would have been far worse for the company than 2 weeks of medical leave. She looked back at the full board. So yes, I'm going to do this job differently. I'm going to model healthy leadership. I'm going to show our employees that you can be excellent without destroying yourself. And if you think that's weakness, then maybe I'm not the right CEO for this company anymore. But I don't think it is. I think it's the future of sustainable leadership. The room fell silent. Vivian could see them processing, weighing, deciding. Gerald looked furious. Patricia looked thoughtful. The chairman's expression was unreadable. We need to discuss this as a board, the chairman said finally. Vivian, if you could step out for a few minutes? She nodded and left, walking to her office on legs that felt surprisingly steady. Rachel was hovering outside trying to look busy while obviously waiting for news. How did it go? Honestly, I have no idea. Vivian sat in her chair, the familiar space feeling both comforting and strange. I told them the truth, that I'm in recovery and doing the work and planning to lead differently. Now it's up to them. That was brave. Or career suicide. We'll see. Vivian looked around her office, at the awards on the walls and the view she'd fought so hard to earn. Rachel, can I ask you something? If they vote me out, do you think I'm making a mistake? Choosing health over ambition? Rachel was quiet for a moment. I think you're choosing to be alive instead of just successful. And I think that's the smartest thing you've ever done, even if it costs you this job. 20 minutes later, Vivian was called back to the conference room. The board members' faces were carefully neutral, giving nothing away. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. The chairman cleared his throat. Vivian, we've discussed your situation at length. Gerald made compelling arguments about the need for strong, consistent leadership, about the potential risks of having a CEO in active treatment, about protecting the company's image and investor confidence. Vivian's heart sank. This was it, the end of everything she'd built. However, the chairman continued, we've also considered your honesty today, your willingness to be vulnerable and real with us, your commitment to modeling healthier leadership. He paused. We've decided to reinstate you as CEO, effective immediately, with conditions. Relief and shock flooded through her in equal measure. Conditions? You continue your treatment as prescribed. You work with HR to develop a sustainable schedule and actually stick to it. You build out your executive team so you're not carrying everything yourself. And you meet with the board monthly to discuss not just business metrics, but your own well-being. The chairman's expression softened. We're not just protecting the company, Vivian. We're protecting you. Because a healthy CEO is better for everyone than a brilliant one who's burning out. I can do that. I want to do that. Vivian felt tears threatening but didn't try to hide them. Thank you for trusting me, for giving me this chance. Gerald stood abruptly. This is a mistake. Mark my words, she'll relapse within 6 months and we'll be right back here having this conversation. Then we'll have that conversation, Patricia said firmly. But in the meantime, we're choosing to bet on growth and honesty over fear and control. If you can't support that, Gerald, perhaps you should consider whether this board is the right fit for you. Gerald left without another word, his exit punctuated by the sharp sound of the door closing. The remaining board members stood, several of them coming around to shake Vivian's hand or offer quiet words of support. When the room finally cleared, Vivian sat alone at the conference table, letting the reality sink in. She still had her company, still had her position, but more importantly, she had a chance to do it right this time, to lead from wholeness instead of desperation. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. How did it go? She typed back. I still have my job, with conditions that will actually make me better at it. Thank you for everything. You did the hard work. I just made toast. Congratulations, Vivian. Proud of you. There it was again. proud of you. Not for her success or her victory, but for choosing to be real and vulnerable and honest. Rachel appeared in the doorway. So, what happened? I'm still CEO, but I'm going to need your help building this out right. Sustainable hours, proper delegation, actually using the team instead of trying to do everything myself. Are you up for that? Ms. Cole, I've been trying to get you to delegate for 3 years. This might be the happiest day of my professional life. They spent the next hour mapping out a new structure. Vivian would work with HR to hire 2 additional vice presidents, taking significant responsibilities off her plate. She'd implement hard stops on work hours, no emails after 7 p.m. unless truly urgent. She'd schedule regular breaks and actually take them. And most importantly, she'd be honest with her team when she was struggling instead of pretending to be superhuman. It felt revolutionary and terrifying and absolutely necessary. By the time Vivian left the office that evening, she was exhausted but genuinely good. She'd faced the board, told the truth, and come out the other side not just intact but stronger. The company was still hers, but now she could lead it as her whole self instead of the fractured, desperate version she'd been. Marcus smiled when he saw her. Good day, Ms. Cole? Surprisingly good, Marcus. Thank you for asking. When she got home, she did something she'd never done before. She changed into comfortable clothes, ordered takeout, and called Daniel. Hey, he answered. Calling to celebrate? Actually, I was wondering if you and Emma wanted to come over. I have this huge penthouse and no food and no idea how to celebrate, but I'd really like to share this with people who actually care about me as a person, not just a CEO. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Emma's already excited about seeing the Sky House again. They showed up with pizza and ice cream and Emma's infectious enthusiasm. Vivian found herself laughing as Emma gave an extensive tour of the penthouse to her father, pointing out all the things she'd noticed on her first visit. They ate dinner sitting on the floor because Emma declared the couch too fancy for pizza, and Vivian discovered she didn't mind crumbs on her pristine carpet nearly as much as she'd thought she would. After Emma fell asleep on the couch, Daniel and Vivian sat on the balcony, not the hidden one from her old life, but the main one, the one where she didn't have to hide. You did it, Daniel said quietly. You chose yourself, and it worked out. It almost didn't. Gerald had votes if the board had gone the other way, but they didn't. And even if they had, you would have been okay, because you've learned that your worth isn't tied to that job. He looked out at the city. I'm really proud of you, Vivian, not for keeping your position, but for being brave enough to show up as yourself. I couldn't have done it without you. You literally saved my life. You saved your own life. I just refused to let you do it alone. He turned to face her. So what's next? Now that you've got your company back and you're not destroying yourself to keep it? I honestly don't know. Build something sustainable. Be honest with my team. Show up for Emma's soccer games. She smiled. Learn to be a person who exists outside of work achievements. Figure out who Vivian Cole is when she's not performing. Sounds like a good plan. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights below. Vivian thought about how different this moment was from the countless nights she'd spent on the other balcony, alone with her secrets and her slowly dying body. How the same view looked entirely different when you weren't trying to escape from yourself. Daniel? She said after a while. Thank you for seeing me when I'd made myself invisible, for staying when it would have been easier to leave, for believing I could be better before I believed it myself. That's what friends do. They show up, they stay, they believe. He stood, checking on Emma, who was still sleeping peacefully. Speaking of which, I should probably get this kid home before she wakes up and demands to live in your penthouse permanently. Vivian walked them to the door, accepting Emma's sleepy hug and Daniel's quiet promise to check in tomorrow. After they left, she stood in her living room, no longer sterile and perfect, but marked with the evidence of actual humans having actually lived in it for an evening, and felt more at home than she ever had. The next morning, Vivian showed up to the office at a reasonable hour. Rachel had already started implementing the new structure, setting up interviews for the VP positions, and blocking off Vivian's calendar to ensure she left by 6 p.m. each day. The team seemed cautiously optimistic, intrigued by the promise of a CEO who was committed to sustainable practices. Vivian's first meeting of the day was with her leadership team. She stood at the head of the conference room, looking at the executives who'd worked for her through the worst of her burnout, and made a choice. "I want to talk to you about something important," she began. "For the past several years, I've been modeling unsustainable leadership, working 80-hour weeks, never taking breaks, treating my body like a machine that didn't need maintenance. And I got sick, developed an addiction, had a breakdown, got suspended by the board. You all knew something was wrong, but you didn't feel safe saying anything because I'd created a culture where admitting struggle felt like weakness." She could see them shifting uncomfortably, unsure where this was going. "That changes now. I'm in active treatment for addiction and anxiety. I'm seeing a therapist twice a week. I'm learning to set boundaries and ask for help. And I'm going to be honest with you about my struggles because I want you to feel safe being honest about yours." Vivian took a breath. "This company is successful, but we can be successful and healthy. We can achieve excellence without destroying ourselves. And it starts with me modeling that." Patricia from Product spoke up. "What does that look like practically?" "It means no more emails after 7 p.m. unless there's a genuine emergency. It means mandatory vacation time for everyone, including me. It means building redundancy into our systems so no single person is indispensable. It means regular check-ins about well-being, not just deliverables." Vivian met each person's eyes. "It means creating a culture where asking for help is strength, not weakness, where being human is acceptable, even at the executive level." The meeting continued with practical planning, but something had shifted. The team seemed lighter, more open, willing to admit when they were stretched thin or needed support. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't change overnight, but it was a start. Over the next weeks and months, Vivian built a new kind of life. She continued therapy with Dr. Reeves, digging into old patterns and building new ones. She attended her medical appointments with Dr. Chen, monitoring her recovery and adjusting medications as needed. She hired the 2 new VPs and learned to delegate, trusting her team to handle things she'd always controlled herself. She left work at reasonable hours and actually spent evenings being a person instead of a productivity machine. She went to Emma's soccer games and school performances, becoming a fixture in the stands. She had regular dinners with Daniel, building a friendship based on honesty and mutual support instead of professional transaction. And she stayed in recovery. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when the craving for a cigarette felt overwhelming, when the old patterns of overwork tempted her, when the fear of not being enough threatened to pull her back into destructive habits. But she had tools now, people to call, strategies to employ, a therapist who wouldn't let her intellectualize her way out of feeling things, a friend who'd walked this path before and knew the terrain. 6 months after her return, Vivian stood at a tech industry conference, preparing to give a keynote speech. The old Vivian would have talked about innovation and disruption and conquering markets. Instead, she walked onto the stage and told the truth. "I'm Vivian Cole, CEO of TechCore Industries, and I'm a recovering addict who nearly destroyed myself pursuing success." She let the words land, watching shock ripple through the audience. "For years, I believed that excellence required sacrifice, that to be truly successful, I had to be superhuman. I worked 80-hour weeks. I ignored my health. I used nicotine to suppress my appetite and manage my anxiety. I convinced myself that I could handle it, that I was different, that the normal rules of human limitation didn't apply to me." She paused, making eye contact with people in the front rows. "And then I collapsed. My body gave out. My mind gave out. I was suspended from my own company because I'd become so unhealthy that my board recognized I was a liability. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." The rest of the speech detailed her journey to recovery, her commitment to sustainable leadership, the ways TechCore was implementing policies that valued human well-being alongside profit. She talked about therapy and boundaries and the revolutionary act of admitting you need help. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. But more importantly, afterwards, dozens of people approached her, other executives who'd struggled in silence, entrepreneurs burning out but afraid to admit it, leaders who'd been taught that vulnerability was weakness and were drowning under the weight of that lie. Vivian gave them Dr. Reeves's information, shared resources, offered the same lifeline that had been extended to her. She watched the relief on their faces when someone finally gave them permission to be human, to struggle, to ask for help without losing respect. That evening, she met Daniel and Emma for dinner at their favorite pizza place. Emma had grown several inches and lost another tooth, her gap-toothed grin even more charming than before. She talked nonstop about her soccer team making the playoffs and a new friend at school, and whether Vivian thought astronauts were cooler than marine biologists. "Both are cool," Vivian said seriously. "You don't have to choose yet. That's what Dad says. But I like to plan ahead." Emma demolished another slice of pizza with the efficiency of someone twice her size. "Are you coming to my playoff game Saturday?" "Wouldn't miss it." After Emma ran off to play the arcade games in the corner, Daniel leaned back and studied Vivian. "You look good. Really good. Not just the physical stuff, though that's better too. You look settled. Like you've stopped fighting yourself." "Most days, yeah. Some days I still want to revert to old patterns. Work too much. Try to control everything, medicate the discomfort away." Vivian sipped her water. "But I have better tools now. And better people around me. You included." Speaking of which, Daniel pulled out his phone, showing her a photo. "I got my architecture license back last week, officially reinstated. I start at a small firm next month. Daytime hours, steady salary, benefits. I can finally stop cleaning offices." "Daniel, that's wonderful." Vivian felt genuinely thrilled for him. "You did it. You rebuilt. We both did. Different paths, same destination. Turns out you can lose everything and still find your way back. Just takes honesty and help, and refusing to give up on yourself." They finished dinner and walked Emma home, the evening warm and full of her chatter. When they reached Daniel's building, Emma hugged Vivian tight. "I'm glad you're our friend," she said simply, "even if you don't have any toys." "I'm glad I'm your friend too, even if I'm terrible at soccer." After they said goodbye, Vivian walked the few blocks back to her building, taking in the city around her. The same streets she'd driven past unseen for years. The same neighborhoods she'd never bothered to explore. All of it familiar and new at once. Back in her penthouse, she stood at her window and thought about how far she'd come. From the woman smoking alone on a hidden balcony, destroying herself in secret, to someone who could stand on a stage and tell the truth about her struggles. From isolation and perfectionism to connection and honest imperfection. From nearly dying to learning how to actually live. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Great speech today. You're trending on social media in a good way. Also, 3 different companies have reached out about partnering on workplace wellness initiatives. Thought you'd want to know." Vivian smiled. Of course, her vulnerability was getting converted into business opportunities. But this time it felt different. Not like performing, but like sharing something that mattered. Using her platform for something beyond profit. She changed into comfortable clothes and settled on her couch with a book she'd been reading purely for enjoyment. No business strategy, no industry analysis. Just a novel someone had recommended because they thought she'd like it. She was 3 chapters in when her phone rang. Dr. Reeves calling outside their scheduled session time was unusual. "Vivian, sorry to bother you in the evening. I just watched your keynote speech. A colleague sent me the link." A pause. "I wanted to tell you how proud I am of you, not just for your recovery, though that's remarkable, but for using your story to help others, for turning your pain into something meaningful. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." "I mean it. When you first called Pathways Recovery, you could barely admit you had a problem. You were terrified of anyone seeing the real you, and today you stood in front of hundreds of people and told the truth about your struggles. That's extraordinary growth." After they hung up, Vivian sat with those words. Extraordinary growth. She'd spent so much of her life chasing extraordinary achievement that she'd never considered the value of extraordinary healing, of becoming someone who could be honest instead of perfect, present instead of productive, connected instead of isolated. The next morning, she woke early, not from anxiety, but from genuine readiness to start the day. She made breakfast, took her medication, went for a run through her neighborhood. At the office, she worked efficiently through her meetings, delegated effectively, and left at exactly 6 p.m. despite having more she could do. Instead of staying late, she went to a recovery support group that Dr. Chen had recommended. Sat in a circle with other high-functioning addicts, lawyers and doctors and executives and entrepreneurs, all learning to be human again. She shared her story, listened to theirs, felt the strange comfort of not being alone in her struggles. Afterwards, a woman approached her. "I'm Sarah. I'm a surgeon, and I've been addicted to prescription stimulants for 5 years. Your keynote speech is what made me finally admit I had a problem. I started treatment last week." Vivian took her hand. "That took courage. The first steps are the hardest." "How do you do it? Lead a company while being in recovery? I'm terrified my hospital will find out and I'll lose my position." "I told them the truth and created systems to support my recovery. Set boundaries, built my team, got honest about my limitations." Vivian smiled. "It's scary, but hiding was killing me. At least this way I'm living." They exchanged contact information, and Vivian found herself becoming part of a network of people supporting each other through recovery. Not just receiving help, but offering it, learning that her story could be a lifeline for someone else still drowning. Saturday arrived with Emma's playoff game. Vivian showed up early, bringing snacks for the whole team, because Emma had casually mentioned they needed a volunteer. She sat with Daniel in the stands, cheering as the kids played with joyful abandon. Emma's team won in overtime, a dramatic goal in the final minutes that sent the parents into chaos. Vivian found herself jumping and screaming alongside everyone else, completely unself-conscious in her enthusiasm. This was what life felt like when you weren't performing, when you were just present and engaged and allowed to feel things without measuring their productivity value. After the game, they celebrated with ice cream. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement, recounting every play, already planning for the championship game next week. "You're coming to that one too, right?" she asked Vivian with the casual assumption of someone who'd never learned to expect disappointment. "Absolutely, I'll be there. Promise?" "Promise." Later, as the sun set over the city, Vivian sat on her balcony, the main one, the one where she didn't hide anymore, and reflected on how profoundly her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been dying slowly, alone, convinced that perfection was the only acceptable state of being. Now she was living imperfectly, surrounded by people who knew the truth and stayed anyway, learning that wholeness mattered more than flawlessness. She thought about Daniel making toast in her kitchen that first terrible day, about Dr. Reeves refusing to let her intellectualize her pain, about Emma's gap-toothed smile and unconditional friendship, about the board choosing growth over fear, about all the moments of grace and connection that had built a new life from the ruins of her old one. Her phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Emma wanted me to tell you that you're the best Sky Lady she knows. Also the only Sky Lady she knows, but still." Vivian laughed, typing back, "Tell her she's the best soccer player I know. Also the only soccer player I know, but I stand by it." She set down her phone and looked out at Los Angeles, the city that had witnessed both her destruction and her rebuilding. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling in silence, convinced they had to be perfect or perish. Somewhere out there, someone was standing on a balcony making the same terrible choices she'd made, drowning in isolation and fear. She couldn't save them all, could only tell her truth and hope it reached the people who needed to hear it, could only model sustainable success and pray it changed the impossible standards that destroyed so many talented people. But she could show up, could be honest, could prove that you could lose control and still find your way back. That asking for help wasn't weakness, but the beginning of real strength. That the person you became after breaking could be better than the one you were before, if you were brave enough to do the work. Vivian Cole was no longer the woman who didn't sleep, who worked 80-hour weeks, who slowly poisoned herself in pursuit of an impossible perfection. She was someone new, someone whole, someone who mattered not because of what she achieved, but because she existed, flawed and struggling and beautifully, courageously human. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.